Shavua Tov. So we're gonna work on understanding a little bit of this week's wonders. Very interesting wonders from the uh, taking the Parasha of Ki Tetzeh, which is going to war. We know there's a war going on that we would like to have it stop. No one wants anyone to be hurt. But when we read in this week's parasha about the war that goes on, we right away take it, learning from the Baal Shem Tov, we take it to ourselves, to the war that we should have between the good and the bad side within ourselves. In this parasha, very interestingly, there's the famous halakha that when you build a house, when you build a roof, you should make sure to keep it safe, to put safeguards on the roof. And the connection between these things that was done by the Noam Elimelech from Lezhensk is that when you're going to war and when you're going to do something special, something good, you have to make sure that you bring safeguards. And the safeguards is the way you look at yourself and at the situation, and you make sure that the good things that you do, you throw off the roof, and you keep to yourself the way you are. And this is very interesting. This week, the Queen passed away, which was very interesting to see a person that really took on the crown, that didn't have a split personality disorder when looking at themselves and what they have achieved. Many people, when they go and they have success of different kind, whether it's actors or athletes of different styles, or people that win the lottery or do business, or people that have various types of successes, when they look at it, they don't understand. It doesn't match what's happening and where I'm right now versus the way I see myself. There's a difference. There's two different things, and that leads to tremendous problems. There were researchers done that shown that people that have success usually die earlier. Unfortunately, it's coping with the fact that there is success in what you have done is very hard. It seems to be easier to not win the war, to be, as they call it today, the underdog in the situation. And it's very interesting that this week in Ukraine, we saw that Ukraine was suffering and suffering and suffering and was losing every single battle. And to the point that Russia thought to themselves that they could be undefeatable. And once they thought that, and they almost convinced the world of it, Ukraine did some moves this week, and Russia was defeated on several fronts. Obviously, it's unfortunately not the end of the war by any means, but you could see that when someone feels that they have done it, that they have won the war, that's when defeat is around the corner many times in that situation. So with this, we want to start this week's wonders. The wonders, Rav Ginsburg brings first a very interesting part of how do we do a real hitbonenut. Now, hitbonenut is a core thing to the way we as Hasidim look at life. The simple translation of hitbonenut is to observe, to contemplate on something, to observe, I like to call it deep thinking about something, taking a subject and thinking about it in a very deep way. So why is this so important to us? Because this month of Elul, the month before we start the new year, is a good time to take the time to contemplate, to think deeply. And first of all, numerically, the word Elul in numerically is the same as Binah, which is the understanding, the second midah. So we can see a connection. We can already feel a connection between this month and understanding and thinking and deep thinking, as the pasuk says, "Velevavo yavin," that his heart will understand. Veshav is like to do tshuva, to return. Verafalo, and he will be healthy. So the ability to return, to do the right thing, and the right thing doesn't necessarily mean the right thing for others, the right things for myself. To be able to connect properly, you have to contemplate, you have to do deep thinking. Now, how do you do it? So the first step of deep thinking, where Ginsburg teaches us, the first step is to stop, stand, not stand just to stand up. Some people have an easier time standing up, but many times we see that the opposite. We do it sitting down, or even almost sleeping. But deep thinking is by neutralizing things that the pace of life, the way things are, whether it's the phone or the computer or people around us, or even could be a watch, or many things stop us from being able to stop and do a process of deep thinking. And in order to do it properly, we must let these things go and stand in our place and look into it deeply. Now, what are the three steps of thoughts, of understanding? So first is Bina. Bina is the simple understanding. That's the conceptual thing, the brains, as we know from Chabad. The basic way of looking at things. It's the cold understanding, which is very nice, but it's on its own. It doesn't affect reality. Then we know that the external part of Bina is called Tvuna. Tvuna, when we look at the translation of it, it could be translated as reasoning or reason, or it could be as intelligence. The difference from our perspective is that Tvuna is already when the understanding, something that we understood, is coming to life, is being used in our day-to-day. We take knowledge and we make it understanding, or we make it something that is the reason for what we do. However, between these two things, or after these two things, there's a third part, and the third part is hitbonenut, which we translated more as observation or contemplation. Now, again, the hitbonenut, the observation, is to take something from understanding and bring it into reason, meaning take something from pure science or knowledge and bring it into something that affects our day-to-day. That part, that middle section, is called hitbonenut, and that's core part of how a chassid is supposed to observe life, how we need to look at life, and everyone can connect. I would think, to the fact that in this generation it's very much missing, meaning deep thinking is completely underrated. Like, people don't do it. People don't stop to think. There's always something catching their interest. The level of understanding becomes very shallow, and that basically what it does is it disconnects our feelings, emotions, in general, and the things that we do from our knowledge and understanding and from Hashem. It disconnects the way we do things from what we think of things. In order to connect it, we have to stop and do the work. We have to be strong about it. We have to stop and do hitbonenut. Now, what do we think about when we do hitbonenut? What do we look at? So if we open the Tanya, for example, we can see that we can look at Hashem's world, Hashem's ways. But what Rav Ginsburg teaches us is we must be careful that what we look at, we connect to. Otherwise, we can be like a parrot. Many times we say that a person praying is like a parrot, where you speak to him and he repeats what you say, just like talking without thinking. The same as you can talk without thinking, like a bird, like a parrot, you can think without understanding. The same thing, like a bird, meaning just like we can talk and just not even connect to what we're saying, we can think based on, we're given X amount of things to think about, and that's it. And we think about them without the connection. That could be what the problem with that is. Instead of leading us to connection, it leads us to basically to imagination. Like we start imagining things instead of connecting to things. One time, Rav Ginsburg, when he was talking about different movies and what it does to you, is one of the main problems with watching a lot of movies or being a person that doesn't think deeply, or that thinks about things that are not connected to reality, to what we can connect to, is that you become disconnected. You start to imagine things instead of to connect to things. It's something deep, but it's something very strong. That in order to connect to things, you must connect your knowledge, your thinking, with something that's real to you. You can't just think about Hashem in the way that's written in the books. You must connect it to what you see. There's a story that the wonders of, I think, last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, was about the Rav Steinsaltz. He was many of the students of Rav Ginsburg also learned by him, and they were actually he's related to Rav Ginsburg. Very special person. That one time, I think the story goes that he was sitting in a sukkah, and his student came to him and started telling him how he learned in Kabbalah about the Star of David. And Rav told him that he read in different history books that it was developed in the 1200s, about 800 years ago. And the student was shocked, like, it's Kabbalah, it's supposed to be something very, very like outside this world. It can't be something that people made. So Rav told him, and this is a very deep understanding, that this world, the way things are in this world, the history, the zoology, the astronomy, the science of this world is the most interesting thing of all worlds. Even the worlds of Kabbalah and the worlds that are above us, they all come to flourishing. They all come to being in this world. And looking at things from the way we see them in this world, looking at things from the simple science and math and the history of this world, we are able to connect much better to Torah and to other things than if we would try to imagine things the way they are in Kabbalah or different places that we don't connect to. If our brain doesn't connect to it, then we're not able to create the connection needed. There's a story about the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, that walked over to his son, the Middle Rebbe, which was known for his deep thinking, and asked him, "What did you think about when you prayed this morning?" And he told him that he thought about how the whole world, the whole reality of the upper world bows down to Hashem. Even the highest level in Kabbalah of Adam Kadmon, the man before this world, which is something very deep, very Kabbalah, very interesting. Um, However, it's obviously not connected to our day to day. And he asked, okay, Father, and what did you think about? And the Alter Rebbe told him, what I davened with, what I thought about was the table in front of me, which normally you would think that maybe he made fun of him for being, but what we're seeing over here is the connection to this world. What the Alter Rebbe was teaching him is you must connect to this world. This world is where things happen and where your brain connects to. And if you connect to this table, you can see Hashem through the table, then you can see Hashem in your heart, and you can have real love of Hashem and awe of Hashem. But if you think about things only the way they are in books, what you've learned outside this world, where our brain doesn't really connect to, then you can fall into false imaginations. Now, at the end of the day, when we look at deep thinking, there are two things that we can take the Torah worlds, the upper worlds, Hashem, the way he is not in this world, and bring it into this world by two ways. One is looking at nature, kind of like science, Maaseh Bereshit, how God created the world. And the other way is looking at ourselves, looking at psychology in our sense, looking at the way we feel and see things, which is much deeper in some sense. Maaseh Machshava, Merkava, which is to put two things together, meaning the way we think of things, the way we feel things is a deeper way of thinking. But those are two ways of explaining things. When we're trying to connect to something, okay, when we're trying to bring an example for something, and we're trying to stop and really understand it, we can look at it from three different ways. We can look at it in Hashem's eyes, which is how we learn it in the books. We can look at it in the world, which is how things are in nature. And we can look at it in psychology, which is how our soul, our nefesh, connects to these things. And if we bring these three things together, meaning if we stop to look at things and we look at them from those angles, then we would be able to connect truthfully and not to have false imaginations, which is which is the failure of it. So we'll use this to contemplate a little bit about which is the second part of this week's wonder, is about Gittin, which in simple is the Gemara of divorce. What is divorce in Judaism? How does it come to play? So there are three things in Judaism. There's nisuim. Nisuim is when someone wants to marry a girl, he goes and he takes witnesses, and he basically writes. Usually we do a nisuim by shtar. We write a shtar saying, I will take care of you, and therefore you will marry me, basically. And that shtar is accepted, and she takes, normally we do a ring today. It's a whole ceremony called kiddushin, which is from the word kadosh, holy, that you take, the man takes the woman and makes her holy to him, which means she's not, holy is something above reality. She's not allowed to be with anyone else. That is the kiddushin. Then there is the second part, is nisuin. Nisuin is when they actually get married, when they are together. In today's generation, we do them together. We do nisuin in the chuppah right before the marriage ceremony starts, and right after the ceremony, they go to be in a room together. They don't necessarily have to be together. They just have to be in the room where they have the option to be completely alone. And that means that she's completely married. And that's the second thing. And the third thing is the option to have a divorce. And divorce, by Jewish divorce, is to write a paper called a get and have witnesses sign on it and give it to the woman. And then she's divorced and is able to go anywhere and marry anyone else. That's the three things that we have in the Jewish world. Now, when we come to see it in Rambam and Maimonides, when we come to look at how he brings about these halachot, when he starts by explaining something very interesting. How it was before we had Torah. how would a person get married before Torah, before we were given Torah, before Torah was in this world, for thousands of years? So he explains, two people wanted to live together, to get married. So the man and the woman would go to a house, to his house. He would bring the woman to his house, and they would be together, and that would be considered as a marriage. That's how the Rambam brings the introduction to getting to marriage in Judaism. Now, what happens? He said, what did Torah add to that? If that's the basic way of doing things, we always say derech eretz. Derech eretz is, as they say, the way of the land. But if we want to explain it, it's manners, it's courtesy. So the basic way, the basic courtesy is before Torah. And what is the derech eretz? The two people, when they want to get married, they basically go to the same place and they're married. That was the basic way of behavior. What did Torah add to that? What Torah added is that they can have a ceremony. And in that ceremony, he goes ahead and writes, he can give her money or write a piece of paper that basically makes her his wife. And there's witnesses, and that's what Torah added to it. Now, the question is asked, what is the reason? Why did Rambam bring the old way of doing things? I mean, it's not common that the Maimonides does this. What was so special about this halakha that was needed to explain how it was before Torah introduced the marriage ceremony? And the answer that the Rebbe brings, the Lubavitch Rebbe brings, is that that way of living, the way of marriage, still exists. Where does it exist? By non-Jews. I mean, today in the world, non-Jews also have different ceremonies. But at the end of the day, if we want to look at the way a non-Jew can get married, and getting married is very important even to non-Jews, because everyone, the basic Sheva mitzvot bnei Noach, the basic 7 mitzvot that anyone in the world should do, is that you can't do adultery. That two people that are married, it's something very strong. And that strong ability only becomes from the fact that she goes to his house. So that basic way of marriage, which is two people deciding that they want to be together and living in the same place together, that's enough. Now, what is Gittin? How does a divorce? What is the difference between before Torah and after Torah of a divorce? So the difference is that by divorce of non-Jew, if two non-Jews decided that they want to get married, they go in the house and they get married very nicely. How do they do that? Just by being together. Then the next day they go to work. So a husband goes to his job and the wife goes to her job, and they decide they're not coming back together. That's enough. That's a divorce. Whether the husband decides it, the wife decides it, that's it. They are not considered married anymore. She can go marry someone else. He can go marry someone else. The basic way of Torah is that the basic way of marriage without Torah is that if you want to be together, you're together. If not, not. And what Torah introduced is that there's another step. There's the get. There's writing a paper. Just like there's a paper to get married, there's a paper to get divorced. The concept of divorce, the way we see it, which is a very complicated situation, which today most of the world does a basic way of doing divorce, just like Jews do. Although still, by the way, in the Arab world, that's how they do it. The man says 3 times you're divorced, and that's it. That's it. 2 minutes, even less. Less than a minute, they can dissolve the marriage. So what did Torah add? The Torah added the steps of having a divorce, something complicated. Okay, I'll make it short. We're also running out of time, but I'll try to explain what we're learning from all this contemplating from these thoughts, from these Torah, what we learned from this. Is that what did Torah try to introduce to the world for us? and what do we take from it, is that the concept of marriage becomes something serious. Marriage has always been something, the basic common courtesy says that when two people want to be together, they're married. That is before Torah. That is the basics of the world. That's how God created the world. What Torah added, that this marriage is going to be something much deeper. It's going to be a decision that the two make, and that decision is going to be so strong that in order to undo it, you have to go through a whole process. That part that makes the decision not only a temporary decision, but a permanent decision, and the part that you can undo it, in a sense, creates a marriage that's full, that's whole. Meaning someone that's married, even a king, it says that a king without a queen is not a king at all. In order to be something, you have to be married. It's the rules of the world, especially by a woman. It's very obvious, but also a man. A person that's not married is not considered something in this world. He's considered nothing. Marriage creates something from a person. Obviously, it can create the ability to have the next generation, but it also gives you a purpose. It gives you meaning. Someone that's not married doesn't have the ability to be a real yesh, a real something. And the ability to have a divorce allows the marriage to be something that has nothing and something within it. The ability to have ayin and yesh together. I see that it's harder for me to explain this. It requires deep thinking, but conceptually, let's take a step back, okay? If we didn't have this whole part, okay, people that do not go by Torah, what is their marriage worth? Is it worth something? Absolutely, it's worth something. If two people, even somewhere in the Philippines, decide that they want to get married, they're not Jewish, they're not bound by Torah, the way they see it, obviously they have Sheva Mitzvot. But they go in the same house and they decide to be together, their marriage is 100% a marriage. It's strong, it binds them. But when they turn around and go out of the house, then that whole bind goes away. What Torah introduces is two steps. The first step is that in order to get married, you have to create a contract. You have to do a kiddushin. And that in order to get divorced, you have to do another contract. That creates a whole level of an elevated level of the seriousness of the institution of marriage. Okay, I hope I explained it a little bit. Maybe I'll take some questions, see if I can explain it a little bit more. So I see there's a question in the chat. Okay, so the question is this the same for man and woman? Because women are not obligated to get married by Jewish law. So the answer is absolutely. They're not obligated to get married from a different perspective, but from the perspective of making a marriage count, yes, they have to work together. It doesn't work if one guy wants to marry a woman or divorce a woman and she doesn't accept it, it doesn't work. And the same thing by a man. Creating something of a marriage has to be a joint decision. Okay, any other questions? Maybe as we say that, maybe you can open the week's wonders and see more wonders from this contemplation. Okay, so in terms of the comment of being something without being married, yes, women and men are both not considered, are both ayin. In terms, a kala, in simple sense, is nothing. Like to have a kilayon is nothing. A person is not something. A person, doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman, is not considered yesh. The level of his being is not considered if they're not married. Absolutely. Now, again, you can do a lot of things as a nothing, which is complicated. But in Jewish way of looking at things, you can look at it from nothing. But if you want to be something, meaning God created the world in order to have within it marriage and after that children. But marriage creates the ability to have yesh, to have something, to be considered something. Again, the consideration and what we do with the yesh and an ayin is something deep in Kabbalah and Chassidut that we can explain another time. But conceptually, just the concept, in order to be something, you have to be married. And I think the world also sees it. That's why there's so much request for different types of marriages, which are not even logical. But they also want to be in that same concept, which everyone sees that there's something very, very special about the marriage. All right, any other questions? And again, I apologize if the second part was not as understood. I do think that there's some deep things that can come out of it if we contemplate about it, if we think about it. Okay. If there's no other questions, and I apologize for the technical stuff in the beginning. We'll wish everyone Shavua Tov and to be a very successful week.